So a few days ago, I uploaded a duel replay of me playing Cubics versus Drytron, which is the current best Tier 2 game, or Tier 2 deck in the game. And I haven't gotten around to making a deck profile for it or explaining it at all, so that's what I'm doing now. Let's get right into it. So we'll start with the boss monster of the deck, and that is Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. Cannot be normal summoned or set, must be special summoned from your hand by revealing 3 other cubic cards in your hand with different names. It's unaffected by other monsters' activated effects whose original attack is 3,000 or less. That part is one of the most important parts about this deck, is the boss monster is super easy to summon and is just immediately unaffected by activated monster effects as long as their original attack is 3,000 or less, which is almost every single monster in the game. When this attacking card destroys a monster by battle, you can basically it can attack twice during this battle phase, and during your end phase, this part is regardless of whether it attacks, each player takes 3,000 damage. So this is kind of a crazy boss monster. It of course does have one big glaring weakness, and that is to spell trap cards. This thing can tank out almost any boss monster your opponent will play. As you saw if you watched the Drytron replay, they even summoned Zeus, they had Herald of Ultimateness, they had their optimal board, but it could not do anything against Crimson Nova. The only way my opponent was able to remove Crimson Nova is by attacking into it with Zeus and clashing. And then I was able to just get another Crimson Nova to summon again. But spell trap card removal, or spell trap cards that remove monsters, that's really the only weakness of this deck. The only 2 cards, or the 2 cards that you'll have to worry about the most, is Forbidden Droplets and Lightning Storm. Those are the only 2 cards that are commonly being played in the top tier decks that do affect this deck. Lightning Storm, if your opponent plays it, they can just destroy Crimson Nova, and sometimes you may not have a follow-up or anything you can really do about that. And then the other one, Forbidden Droplets, that card does mess up Crimson Nova because it negates its effect and cuts its attack. By negating its effect, it's no longer unaffected by monsters, so if they do have a monster that can remove it from the field, they can do that. But other than those 2 cards, you don't have too much to worry about. Thankfully, both of those cards are mostly either 2 ofs, sometimes 3 ofs, and they are not searchable. Well, Forbidden Droplets is technically searchable depending on what deck you're playing. If you'd like to see what deck can search Forbidden Droplets, you should check out one of my previous videos about the Generator deck. But anyways, that's enough self-promotion for that. Lightning Storm, though, definitely not searchable, and if your opponent doesn't open with it, it's pretty dead, because they can't use it if they have any face-up cards. So, Lightning Storm, definitely not as big of a threat as Forbidden Droplets, but still, for that being the main weakness of this deck, I think it's pretty good, considering Forbidden Droplets and Lightning Storm are a weakness that a lot of decks have. So, anyways, moving on with the cards. So the next most important cubic monster is Duja, the Meteor Cubic Vessel. It's a walking Foolish Burial. If this card is normal or special summon, you can send a cubic card from your deck to the graveyard. That is really important because there are a couple of your cubic spell or trap cards that you want in your graveyard, but we'll get back to those later. The second effect on it doesn't really matter as much. If a monster was sent to your graveyard, you can make it gain 200 attack for each monster with a different name in your graveyard. The next most important cubic monster is Vijam, the cubic seed. If you watched that replay, you saw this card came in clutch as a continuous effect, cannot be destroyed by battle, so that part cannot be negated. So if your opponent doesn't have any kind of direct monster removal, this can really stall out until you can get your Crimson Nova. But if your opponent doesn't have any negations, then you can kind of go crazy with this card, because if this card battles an opponent's monster, it doesn't matter who declares the attack, it could be you attacking them or them attacking you, place this card in your spell and trap zone as a continuous spell, and if you do, place a cubic counter on that opponent's monster. If this card is treated as a continuous spell card by this effect during your main phase, you can special summon this card from your spell and trap zone. This is not a once per turn, and it doesn't specify main phase 1. So one thing that you saw me do in the replay is I attacked my opponent's monster with Vijam. It went to the spell trap zone, so I put a cubic counter on their monster. I entered main phase 2, special summon Vijam in defense position, and then in my turn, so I was able to do that, continue. Monsters with a cubic counter cannot attack, also their effects are negated. So this thing is kind of like a walking fiendish chain that you can use multiple times each turn, and is more difficult to get rid of than fiendish chain, or than some other monsters. So this card's pretty good. The rest of the cubic monsters don't matter, like at all. All of these you don't care about. All 8 of these are they're useless aside from their name. The only reason you play them is because they have cubic in their name, so you can use them to summon with Crimson Nova. You definitely play a lot more of the cubic spell or trap cards because they are significantly more useful than these monsters. Each of the monsters do have their effects, but if you want to read them, you can. I don't think I've ever once actually used any of these effects, so I wouldn't worry too much about those. The next monster we have is Summoner Monk. This can be crazy. So it can't be tributed. When it's normal summoned, you switch it to defense position. But here's the main effect. Once per turn, discard a spell, special summon 1 level 4 monster from your deck, but it cannot attack this turn. That's not really relevant, but the first part is. You can use Summoner Monk to special summon Duja from your deck, and on special summon, it can send a cubic card from your deck to the graveyard. Now, if there's a really crazy combo you can do if you have a specific spell in your hand along with Summoner Monk, but I'll get to that later. Pot of Desires is crazy in this deck because you don't really need... You play so many copies of all of the cards that you really need that banishing 10 from your deck to get an extra 2 is great, especially because this is largely an OTK deck. Pot of Extravagance, even better. You will never really use your extra deck ever unless it's to go into Trinity, the Dark Cubic Lord, but we'll get to that later. Pot of Extravagance, amazing for this deck because it really doesn't have a cost for you. Really quick before we go to the other ones, we can go over Recurring Nightmare. Target 2 dark monsters with 0 defense in your graveyard, add those targets to your hand. Crimson Nova has 0 defense. Vijam, 0 defense. All of these cubics, 0 defense. The only 2 monsters in your deck that do not have 0 defense is Duja and Summoner Monk. So you can use Reoccurring Nightmare to get Crimson Nova back from your graveyard, get Vijam back from your graveyard. So that's really good. I'd only play it as a 1-of though because it's more for a late game play or mid game play. So you don't really want to open with it at all. So now for the spells. So the main Karma, or the main cubic spell, is Cubic Karma. Skipping the first part, what we care about is the very last part here. You can banish this card from your graveyard add 1 cubic monster from your deck to your hand. Not a once per turn. And it has no restriction on, oh, you can't activate this the same turn it was sent to the graveyard. No, just, it's free. This is the main thing that you're going to send to the graveyard with Duja, because it can search any cubic monster, including Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. Now, if you have Cubic Karma and Summoner Monk in your hand, it's even wilder, because you can summon Summoner Monk, discard Karma, special summon Duja. Duja will send Karma from your deck to the graveyard, and then you can use both Karmas in your graveyard to search 2 cubic monsters, sometimes even 2 cubic Novas, depending on what else is in your hand. And one thing that I do want to mention, you can target another Crimson Nova to summon Crimson Nova. So you just have to reveal 3 other cubic cards in your hand. It doesn't say 3 cubic cards with different names or anything like that. So, it does say different names, but it doesn't say it can't be Crimson Nova. So if you have 2 Crimson Novas in your hand and 2 other cubic cards, you can still summon 1 Crimson Nova by revealing the other. I explained that confusingly, so I apologize for that. The other effect does come into play sometimes, but not nearly as much. When it's activated, and it's a continuous spell, by the way, you can target a cubic monster, send any number of Vijam, the cubic seed, from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and that monster gains 800 attack for each. So it can come into play. It gives your monster, I think that's 2400 attack, so it boosts Crimson Nova up to 5400 attack. And that's another way some opponents can get around Crimson Nova, is destroying it by battle. But if you boost it up that high, it's very unlikely to be able to be destroyed by battle. And that attack gain does apply even if it leaves the field, even if this card leaves the field, and it's permanent. So it doesn't say for the end of this turn; it's just forever. And then if you special summon Vijam during your opponent's turn, you can send this card to the graveyard if you do half your opponent's life points. That includes itself. So if you use Vijam, it goes to the spell and trap zone, and you special summon Vijam using its own effect. Cubic Karma will activate to half your opponent's life points and send Karma to the graveyard, which lets you banish it to search for a cubic card. So Karma, by far the most important spell card in the entire deck. The other 2 spell cards are also pretty powerful. We have Cubic Wave. Target a cubic monster you control and monster your opponent controls. The monster you control becomes double. The monster your opponent controls becomes half. That's not once per turn, so if you have 2 of these and you target Crimson Nova, it jumps straight up to 12,000 attack. So then you have a 12,000 attack monster, unaffected by monster effects, can attack twice. You pretty much have game right there in most situations. The other effect does come into play sometimes. You can banish this card and any number of cubic monsters from your graveyard. Target face-up monsters your opponent controls equal to the number banished, and put cubic counters on those monsters. So this is kind of like a Forbidden Droplets Fiendish Chain hybrid. You banish cubic monsters, target multiple monsters your opponent controls, and hit them with a Fiendish Chain. They can't attack, they can't activate their effects. Cubic Dharma. You take no battle damage from attacks involving your cubic monsters. That partners up really well with Vijam, because you can just swing into your opponent's monster, not have to worry about that battle damage. Then you can send a cubic card from your hand to the graveyard to draw a card, or you can banish this card from your graveyard to target a cubic monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So this is kind of like a more searchable and a better version of Recurring Nightmare, because it's super easy to get this thing into your graveyard, and you can get Crimson Nova back to your hand. You can even get Duja back to your hand if you want. So this thing is really good. I think it's just a little too bricky to have at 3 since it's a hard once per turn, so that's why I run it at 2. and because, of course, it's easily searchable. So, unification of the cubic lord. Oh, sorry, I forgot to go over Foolish Burial Goods. Foolish Burial for spell trap cards. Send a spell trap card from your deck to the graveyard. Obviously, that's amazing. Just free karma, free dharma. You know, wave if you want. So that's really good. I would actually play 3 of them. I just don't have a third one. Once I craft it, I'm definitely going to play this at 3 and probably take out one of the desires in exchange. But anyways, unification of the cubic lords. So this is how you can do your fusion summon for your cubic fusion, but you don't really need to. You won't rely on that very much at all. The trap cards in this deck are a bit more like the monsters, where you mainly only play them because of their names, but their effects do have a use in certain situations. Fusion summon a cubic monster using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If the face-up cubic monster is destroyed or destroyed by battle or leaves the field, banish this card, special summon a level 4 or lower cubic monster from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, and if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle card effects. You'll mainly use that to summon Duja, to send Karma, or Dharma, you know, depending on what play you want to make to follow up next turn. Cubic Ascension. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon Vjam, and if you do, change the attack target to it and perform damage calculation. So that's pretty good. And then if your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 higher than yours, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon Vjam from your hand, deck, or graveyard, and then if only your opponent controlled a monster. So if you didn't have any monsters on the field when this was activated, you can special summon 2 more Vjam. So this not quite so useful, but it can come up occasionally, you know, when you don't really have any sort of defense and you just want to wall up with Vjam. Cubic Casualty. This one, I think this one is significantly better. Distribute a number of cubic counters on monsters your opponent controls up to the number of cubic monsters you control. Generally, that'll be at least 1, assuming you have Crimson Nova or Vjam. Typically, at least 1. So this is a free Fiendish Chain that can potentially affect multiple different monsters. And then you can banish it from your graveyard, target a cubic monster this turn that each time it destroys a monster by battle that has a cubic counter, you can inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original attack. So it basically, technically, just allows your cubic monster to attack directly in terms of damage. But the graveyard effect is nowhere near as good as the first effect. We have our fusion monster. Don't expect to go into it too much, but it is really fun when you can. It has 4,500 attack. It requires 3 Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. So this is kind of like the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon for this deck. Cannot be summoned by other ways. Cannot be targeted or destroyed by opponent's card effects. So this card does get around Spell or Trap card disruption, but it's not unaffected by monster effects. When this card declares an attack, half your opponent's life points. So usually this alone is gained because it has crazy amount of attack. And then it can attack twice, and if you take effect damage, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage you took. If there's ever a situation where you have Trinity, that's this card, plus a Crimson Nova, on your end phase you're burning your opponent for 6,000, burning yourself for 3,000. And that is possible with Cubic Dharma to get Crimson Nova back into your hand, or Recurring Nightmare, either way. Like I said, don't expect to go into this too much. All of your extra deck is mainly just extravagance fodder. Now, if you want to play, I would recommend playing a Ultra Polymerization. I have a couple targets for it here. I have Verte Anaconda just because I pulled it. I didn't craft it or anything. It could come into play to help get around some problematic monsters, but generally monsters aren't an issue for this deck. So that is going to be it for the deck list. I will go ahead and jump into doing a live duel so you all can see that. Another great thing about cubics, so a lot of people's complaints about Master Duel is how slow it is, how long each game takes. Cubics are what you want to play if you want a fast duel. I'd say this is one of the fastest OTK decks. Another great thing about this deck, ooh, that was a pretty card. Another great thing about this deck is since it doesn't rely on the extra deck at all, you don't have to fear the Dogmatica cards. Punishment could be a problem depending on what they have in their extra deck. Depending on if they have a monster. Ooh, this is good. Alright. So we can go Desires first, try to bait out any Ash Blossom. There was no delay, we got a Crimson. Are we really about to be able to... I'm pretty sure we are able to summon the... we're literally able to... The one time where we're able to summon the Fusion Monster, we're facing a Dogmatica deck. That's... That's upsetting. But okay, so we'll go Summoner Monk. Use Summoner Monk to discard Karma. To special summon Duja, which will send another Karma. So we'll have 3 Crimson Nova in our hand. Oh wait, depending on what we banished from... Ooh, I didn't think to look at that. Okay, so we did banish one of our Cubic Lords, but that is perfectly okay. And I think we also lost... Oh, perfect. I'm glad they're using that now. We banished our 2 Dharma and 1 Karma. So, great thing about this is Duja still goes through. To send our Karma. Well, I guess sending Karma didn't really matter because we already have Crimson Nova in our... We only have 2 Crimson Novas we can search. But it's okay. We can use the other Karma, because right now we only have 2 cubic names that aren't Crimson Nova. So we can go ahead and search a 3rd cubic card, and now we can summon both Crimson Nova. And then I'm not going to worry about setting either of these. Well, actually, I'll set Casualty just in case, but I'm pretty sure we win this. So this can attack twice. Then this can attack once. And then during the end phase, we both take 3,000 damage, and that's game. Easy. Alright, so that was the Cubic deck. So I showed you the deck profile for it, showed you a duel with it, what it can do, that kind of thing. Let me know what you think down below. Leave a like on the video if you liked it. Subscribe so you see my future videos. And thank you so much for watching. You all have a great day.